Welcome to this fantastic tutorial. I will show you how to create and display users. It will be a full stack application built with PHP 7, JavaScript and SQLITE 3. Please subscribe to my channel, like the video and enable notifications, because as soon as I am done with this tutorial, I will start creating the tutorial so you can edit and delete users. Let's go right away to VS Code so we can start coding it. As you can see it over here, I have already set up VS Code, and over here I have just a page which I have opened it in mobile mode. I have chosen to show it as Galaxy S5. You can choose whatever you want. I have placed my console, my development tools down here. They could be at the right side hand, but that will take too much space. I have already opened and started the XAMPP application, so my Apache server is running on port 80. To start the code, please go and create a new folder. I will do it on the htdocs. I will create a folder. Let's call it just company. This folder company will allow us to put all the code in there. Select the folder. I don't need this, I don't need that, and this here we can just ignore it. Let me zoom in a little bit. The company folder will have the index page. It's going to be an HTML page. And right away we can create the first HTML template. So let's do some HTML5, zoom in a little bit. And over here we just call it company. That would be the title for our company. I save it. I have to point to localhost / company. And then I see the title over here being company. The idea with this application is the following. I would like to be able to build it in a way that I can somehow, let me just hide this for a second. I can put here a text box, and over here a text box, and over here a button. This text box will be for the name of the user. This one here will be for the last name of the user. I put the letter B, and this button will say add the user. As soon as you click on this button, the letter A, which is the name, will appear underneath this form. The letter B, which is the last name, will also appear, and then we will have the delete. We're not going to code the delete, but that is the idea. If I didn't put the letter A or B, if I do a C inside the text box and a D, and then I click on this add button, add user button, and we'll get the letter C, the letter D, and so on. When I go and reload the page, the data should have been saved in the database. Therefore, I can create and visualize the user. Let me close that so we can get to the code. Period and close it. Now that you have the idea, as you saw in the diagram I just drew, we need a form in the body. I will do the form. And this form will have no action for now. This is going to be done via Ajax, so the action doesn't do anything. I'm going to build one input box, and the placeholder will be for the name. I also need a second input box. The placeholder will be for the last name. I save it, reload the page. That's what I have so far. I will also create a button. The button will say add, let's say, user. Save it, reload, that's the button. As you can see here, the original diagram was supposed to have the name next to the last name, next to the button. So we will need to style all of these. We could do it right away. Let's hook it to a link. It's going to be an external app.css file. I don't have it, so I will have to build it. I will go here and create the app.css. Inside the app.css, I will put all the code related to the style of the page. Always do the all, the star, set a margin to be 0. You don't need the px, but you can also put it there if you want it. Set a padding to be 0 px, and set the box sizing to be box border. Try to use the auto completion so you avoid typos. 2 seconds, a quick check, everything's fine. Now I'm going to reload. Oh, I need to save this. I save that. Reload. As soon as I reload, this tiny space should be gone. and that's gone because I have these properties. I'm going to do this in one line because I will not touch this line again. It's working as expected. I will also style the body. The body will have a width, and the width will be 100 of the viewport horizontally speaking. The height will be 100 of the viewport vertically speaking. And to be able to point to the body correctly, I will give it a color. I will do an RGBA, and this RGBA will have, let's do a 250, 200, 50, and the opacity will be 1. It's going to be yellow. Let's see that. Sure, that looks fine. I also need to style the form, this form that I created there. So I will create the style for the form. I will tell the form that's going to be a grid, and I'm going to split it into 3 sections. So we'll say grid, template, columns. I will do 1 section that will be 1 fraction, 1 fraction, and 1 fraction. I save it and test it. This button here is not being displayed correctly because this text box are using too much space. So let me do this form, and then I will style by the input. I will say that the input has a width of 100%. Save it, and then I'm going to reload the page. That's looking better. I still have an issue here. Text boxes and the button are actually touching the body of the page, the right side and the left side hand. So I will go to the body, and then I will give a padding to it. I'm going to give a padding to, let's do 10 pixels towards every single side, top, bottom, right and left. That looks better. My input boxes are too small. I don't like the size of them. I will enlarge them a little bit. So that's for every input box actually in the system. So I will say input. The height will be 245 pixels. Let's test. Looking much better. The cursor touches the left side of the input box. So for every input, I will give a padding to the left of, let's do 10 pixels. Right, so that's looking much better. I still have an issue here. These text boxes have a border, and they actually have what's known as an outline. So it gets a little bit of a color when I click on them. And the border, I don't actually like it. I'm going to get rid of the border. It's going to be none, and the outline is also going to be none. Let me test it. Much better. The same thing I should do for the bottom actually, just except that the padding left should not be there. So I will copy this in a second for the bottom. Since they are touching each other, these elements, I will go to the form, and then I will create a column gap. It used to be called a grid column gap. Now it's just column gap. I will do 2px. That's better. Now we'll style the button. I told you that the button has almost the same properties as the input box. So I will just do here the button, and I will paste what I just copied from the input box. This is wrongly copied. I do this, I indent correctly. The button doesn't have a padding, and then I reload. So that's what I expect. I click here. If you pay attention to the title bar, actually it's reloading the page. This I will prevent in a second. Let's go here in the form, and if I don't want this to be reloading the page, you can do something like on submit equals on submit equals, and then I will say return false. You can also prevent default if you want it. I like this technique. I want to keep it as simple as possible. I'm clicking on the add user and nothing is happening. That's fine. The page is not actually being reloaded. The idea is that as soon as I click on this button here, I should call the function that will create this user. the function should display the user in the DOM, and it should also send the data to the server, so the server will save it in the database. So let's code that function. Let's give it a name. Let's call it add user. It's a logical name, so we keep that add user. I don't have the JS file. I could add the JavaScript here in a script tag, but I want to point to the external file. So I will say that I want to point to the app.js. I don't have that file, so we'll build it now. App.js. This file will contain all my JavaScript code. So I told you that we have the function add user. Let's do a quick test. I will say function add user, and let's console.log just the letter O, just to see if actually we get something here. We need to call the function. I will just call it here. I could do a self-invoking function too, but I don't want to do that. I want to call it here explicitly. So I get the letter O. This function is running fine. If I save again, I click here in add user and I click enter, you can see how the counter increases because the form is actually being submitted. It's not doing anything, but it's being submitted. Now that we have that, how about if we pass this data to the server? And here we have to consider that if we want to pass the data from these two input boxes, then they must have a name, because what I will do is I will actually post the whole form. I don't want to create variables in a JSON object to send individual elements to the server. I think it's much better just to send the whole form. So I will have to give it a name, and I will also have to give a name to the last name. I will call it something that makes some sense. I will say that's the text for the name, and this is the txt for the last name. These variables will go to the server. Let's go to the app.js, and since I will be using fetch is actually working asynchronously, and I don't want to use promises. I want to use async await. So I will do this function. I will declare it to be an asynchronous function, and over here I can do fetch. I test again that the page is not being submitted, and that's fine. Let's do some fetch here. I know that fetch is going to respond with some data to this function, so we'll create let sData. This s I'm writing here, it means that I expect to get text out of the fetch function. So we'll say that this equals fetch. Fetch takes at least the first argument, that will be the URL where the API is located over here, but I do not have the API, so I think it's better if I build it before I actually point to it. Let's create a new file. I will call it API dash, and since this API will allow me to create a user, I will call it create dash user.php. So that's my API. This API must be a PHP file. Never close the PHP tag whenever you do APIs, never do that. And this API will take some data and it will save it in the database. Which data? It's the whole thing that I send inside the form. Since this element has a name and that element also has a name, that data will be passed. So we just copy this. I will put it in the API as a comment for now, and I will paste it. I do this because I don't want to forget the variable names that I will get via post. So now I can say that via post, I'm going to get a variable, and then I will save it inside the s name. I do s because that's text, and this s name will be whatever I get from posting the form, and that will come inside the txt name. So I copy and paste it here. I duplicate the line, Control Shift arrow down. I can show you how I did that. I will just put it here. To duplicate the line, Control plus Shift plus arrow down, just for you to learn. I duplicate the line again so you can see it. And the second variable I get via post is the txt lastname. Therefore, I will extract this txt lastname inside this variable called lastname. I always copy and paste stuff like this so I don't mess up the names and I don't have to go between files constantly. Since that's done, I can delete it. And I also need to get and save the ID of the user actually. The ID is something that the server, the API will create for me. It's not something that the client will pass to the server. So we'll create a variable. I will call it SID. And PHP has a function called unique ID. I want to try one. I think it's called bin to X. At least it's blue now, so it makes some sense. Probably is the correct function. And then I will do a random byte. I want 16, and this will actually get me 32 characters. Alphanumeric characters actually. Alphanumeric characters. So text with numbers combined. I think that's fine for now. I want to do a test. I will just echo, and then I want to echo the ID just to make sure that the function is the correct one. It's over here that I can go and hit Postman, because this is an API. You should actually test it with Postman. I will open Postman from here, and then I will put the URL here. Localhost, pointing to company, pointing to the API, create user.php, and that's going to be a post. I will pass the txt name, which will be the letter A. It's not going to be used for anything at the moment. I'm just setting this up. Txt last name, which will be the letter B. When I send, I get this out. This is the ID that I created via the function bin2x. So this is working fine. I'm happy with the result. I go back here, and now I need to connect to the database, because this is what I want to save inside the database. I don't have the database, so I'm going to show you something really cool. And by the way, if you're using SQLITE 3, most of you will never need any other database than that one. Many people suggest that you use Oracle or Postgres. You don't really need it. 99% of the web, 99.9999% could run on SQLITE. So one day I will make a video about my test about SQLITE, so you will be actually impressed to see what it can do. I'm going to install an extension. I just click here. Let me see, SQLITE. This extension here is the one that will allow us to interact with the database. Go ahead and install it. Okay, this extension is enabled globally. That's fine. It seems that's okay. I close this, and then I go back here. To create a database is fairly simple. Let's click on this new file and let's build a database. You can call it whatever you want. How about we call it company.db, because all the data will be inside the company's database. So I hit enter. I have the file. I will not be using this file at all. And now I need to see, and I need to somehow get SQLITE here so I can create tables inside this company DB. To do that, I'm going to press the following keys: Control plus Shift plus the letter P. Hopefully that is going to pop up the SQL thing, the SQL window that I will get in here. I will try it. Remember, this has nothing to do with PHP, that's just the shortcut in the keyboard. Control Shift P. Once you get that up, type SQLITE and click on the link that says Open Database. Once you have clicked there, this extension automatically tries to find a file that could be a database. and it finds this .db because the extension is for a database. If you have done company.SQLITE, maybe it will have found it as well. I select this, and over here you see the SQLITE Explorer. Let me expand it, and I get that out. In some computers, maybe you get the outline on top of it. You can just drag and drop the outline to the bottom. Now that I have this SQLITE, you can see that this company DB is actually the database, is a plain empty file at the moment. So we need to create tables and put data inside that file. To do that, right click and let's say new query. Yeah, let's do that. And we're going to save this file so we remember the queries later. Let's save it. Not here. Yeah, sure. Let's just save it. Let's save it as queries.SQLite. The name is here now, queries.SQL. I got an extension here for MySQL or something like that, I don't care. So these queries will contain all the queries for our database. I have to show you this here. Reload, I don't have anything. So in here we'll create the first query. It's actually one that will allow me to create a table inside the database. Create table, and only if it doesn't exist. If not exists, I will create a table called users, and these users will have an ID which will be text. In SQLite everything is actually text. I don't want to get in details with it, but it just works. Not null, because we must have an ID and the unique must be unique. We also need a name, which is going to be text, and we must have it. You must provide the name, so it has to be not null. I told you that we need a last name, so we'll build the last name. It's going to be text, and you must provide with a last name. I will do a comma here. I am missing here a line. It's because I like to work without row ID in SQLite. And that means that I will actually provide my primary key. SQLite is not going to handle that. Over here I say that the primary key is going to be the ID. I think this will work. I save it. And I need to run it. To run this query, I right click, and then you have several options. Run query will run the whole page, and run selected query will run only what you have selected. Since I only have this query, I can just say run query or do Ctrl+Shift+Q. I will do that shortcut later. For now, run query. And then when I run it, actually this file doesn't know in which database it has to run it. So I will just select the company DB database. I will do this again. Run query, select the company DB. I have an error near the ID, have a mistake, and then I just close it and try to debug it. Create table users, ID text, not null, unique, everything seems correctly. I don't see any mistakes here. ID text, not null, unique, name text, not null, last name text, not null, or primary key. It says primary key. Primary key. That was a mistake. So now we'll do Ctrl+Shift+Q, and I can see the message that says Scrabble created. Don't worry about this. I didn't see anything down here, so this is running fine. You don't see anything here because you always have to refresh it. When you refresh it, you will see the table called users with ID, with the name, and the last name. This query is fine. I will not run this query anymore because you only create the table one time. I will just comment it out, save the query, close it. I will also save this API and then go back to what I was doing. Once you have the API create user, you need to connect to the database. So we'll do a try catch. You have to have this on so you can code better actually. And I will do the catch will be a PDO exception. and the exception will be an EX. Whenever an exception happens, since this is an API, I will actually echo a string that looks like JSON, and I like to echo actually the status being 0 because something went wrong, and I want to actually show in which line number. For development, that's fine, so I will just say that the line number will be, and then I will concatenate the line number. All right, and after you echo, I can exit. If this is not the last line of code, if something happens here, then I have to put an exit. If nothing happens here, you don't put it, but get used to it. In every catch, just put an exit. All right. Let's now connect to the database because that's what we need. So we go here and then we say that actually we're going to create a variable called DB that will be the database. And this is going to be a new PDO. This PDO is the driver that allows me to connect PHP to the SQLITE database. And the command says SQLITE. And then I have to provide the file in which the database is contained. And then I call it company.db. So now I'm connected to the database and I need to tell it that I want to be able to spot mistakes, and I also want to get all the results in an array with JSON objects. That's really important. So I'll show you how to do that. We said in the database that we're going to set the attribute, and the attribute that we want is going to be a PDO attribute. And what we need is the error mode first of all. Attribute, error mode, I get it down there. And the error mode I'm going to get is the attribute error mode for exceptions. So let me see what it is. Attribute, error mode, PDO, error mode for exceptions. Yeah, exception. Great. I also need to set the second attribute. This attribute is going to be the PDO attribute, but this is going to be now in order for us to fetch the data as an associative array with JSON objects in it actually. So we say that the attribute is going to have the default mode, and that's going to be a PDO, and the default mode is actually the one that I want to set it as default, is actually called fetch associative. Let me see what I have it. Fetch associative, assoc. This will actually fetch the data as an array with several JSON objects in it, and that's what we need because we need to pass this to the front end so the front end can loop through these JSON elements. Once we have that, we can actually create a statement, and this statement is going to say that the database